He walked through the door, laughing like he had just won the world, asking if I missed him. I smiled back because in my hand I held the one thing he thought he had buried forever. When his laughter died, I knew our marriage had just shifted from betrayal to a crime. He thought 5 days in Phoenix made him safe, but he forgot who he married. My name is Mallory Hart. I deal in calculated probabilities. As a risk and compliance manager at Harborline, a job that requires me to stare at spreadsheets until the numbers bleed into narratives. I know that anomalies are rarely accidental. At 36 years old, I have built my life on a foundation of verified data and rigid schedules. So when my husband, Derek Hallstrom, walked through the front door after a 5-day business trip to Phoenix, the first thing I noticed was not his smile, but the deviation in his baseline behavior. He was laughing. It was a loud, boisterous sound that bounced off the high ceilings of our foyer. It was not the laugh of a man happy to see his wife. It sounded like the relief of a man who had just walked away from a car crash without a scratch. Babe, God! It is good to be home, Derek said, dropping his leather weekender bag on the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. He moved toward me, but his eyes darted over my shoulder, scanning the living room as if he expected the furniture to have moved. Phoenix was intense. Just non-stop meetings. He pulled a small, crinkled paper bag from his coat pocket and thrust it toward me. Inside was a plastic snow globe, the kind you buy at an airport newsstand for $9. It was careless. It was cheap. For you, he said, finally meeting my eyes for a split second before looking away again. Hey, did you happen to go into the garage while I was gone? Specifically the metal cabinet. The question was too specific. It was a probe. No. I lied smoothly, keeping my face perfectly neutral. I have been busy with the quarter-end reports. Why? No reason. Just thought I left something unlocked. Good. That is, good. He exhaled, a long, shaky breath that smelled of stale airplane coffee and something else. I stepped in to hug him, not out of affection, but to gather data. As I pressed my face against his shoulder, I smelled it. It was not the floral scent of a mistress. It was a sharp, musky cedar, expensive men's cologne, a scent Derek never wore, yet it clung to the collar of his shirt as if he had been in a prolonged embrace with someone who did. You must be exhausted, I said, pulling back. Go shower. As he bounded up the stairs with that strange, manic energy, I looked down at his bag. The luggage tag was flipped over. I turned it with a manicured fingernail. The 3-letter airport code printed on the sticker was not PHX for Phoenix. It was totally different. I let the tag flip back. I walked to the kitchen island and opened my laptop. I did not scream. I did not cry. I logged into our home automation system. The log showed a critical update. Admin privileges transferred. The timestamp read 2:14 in the morning. I was asleep at the hotel. Mal. He had told me on the phone last night. Dead to the world. But at 2:14 in the morning, someone had used his credentials to lock me out of the administrative side of our own house. I checked my backup email, a secure account Derek did not know existed. A single automated notification sat in the inbox. Alert access changed secondary archive still active. He had changed the locks digitally, but he had missed the backup server where the camera footage was stored. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This was not just an affair. Affairs are messy and emotional. This was strategic. This was a hostile takeover. I took my phone out and photographed the luggage tag. I took a screenshot of the system log. I saved every piece of data to an encrypted cloud drive. Then I closed my laptop and put on my best smile. Derek came back downstairs, toweling dry his hair. He looked cleaner, lighter, almost arrogant. He walked over to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, cracking it open with a satisfying hiss. You know, Mal, he said, taking a long swig and leaning against the counter. I feel like Like things are finally turning around. Everything is finally mine. The promotion, the deal, all of it. He grinned at me, a wolfish, victorious grin. I looked at him, my hand resting on the counter where my phone lay hidden under a napkin. Yeah, I said, my voice soft, letting the pause hang in the air just long enough to make him blink. I just found something that belongs to me, too. I left the house at 6 in the morning, executing a perfect pantomime of my daily routine. I drove my usual route toward Harbor Line, but 3 blocks away. I pulled over and waited. My gut told me the anomaly from last night was not an isolated event, but the start of a sequence. At 9 o'clock, I turned the car around. When I pulled into the driveway, the visual shock was physical. Like a blow to the chest, my life had been evicted. Dozens of cardboard boxes were lined up on the asphalt in military precision. They were sealed with cheap packing tape, labeled in Derek's jagged handwriting, kitchen, wardrobe, office. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking sharply on the pavement. The front door opened before I reached the steps. Derek stood there, blocking the entrance to the home I had paid the down payment for. He held a single sheet of paper in his hand. "Do not take another step, Mallory," he said, his voice void of the nervous energy from last night. It was cold now, practiced. "This is a notice to vacate. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects from the premises. If you attempt to enter the residence, I will call the police and report a trespassing incident." "Trespassing?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. "My name is on the deed. Derek." "Not anymore." He smirked. "Read the fine print of that refinance agreement you signed last month, or do not. It does not matter. You are erratic. Mallory, you are mentally unstable. I have already filed for an emergency protective order." I stared at him, processing the sheer scale of the ambush. He had been planning this for months while I was working late to pay off our debts. Then, movement in the hallway behind him caught my eye. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the foyer and stood beside him. It was Bria Hart, my younger brother's wife. She was smiling, a soft, pitying smile that did not reach her eyes. She was wearing my cashmere sweater, the gray one I had bought in Milan 3 years ago. It hung loosely on her frame, but she wore it with a possessiveness that made my stomach turn. "Hi, Mal," she said. The nickname acted like a physical slap. Only my family called me Mal, coming from her, standing in my doorway next to my husband. It was a violation. "You look tired," Bria continued, smoothing the front of my sweater. "Derek told me about your episodes. We just want you to get help." "Episodes," I repeated, looking between the two of them. "I have been appointed to the board at Ravenport Freight Group effective this morning," Derek announced, puffing out his chest. "We cannot have a liability at home while I am managing the family legacy. You are a risk. Mallory." I looked down at my phone. I tried to open the security app to show them I knew about the login change. Access denied. He had revoked my permissions, but he had forgotten the redundancy. My watch vibrated. The Emergency Cloud Archive sent a push notification. I tapped it. A video clip from 2 days ago loaded on my small screen. It was recorded in our living room. Bria was walking through the frame, glass of wine in hand. She walked right up to the camera lens, reached out, and tapped the glass. In the video, she smiled directly at the lens and mouthed, "I want her to see." She knew. She wanted this moment. She wanted me to know she had taken my life, my house, and my husband. I looked up from the screen. I did not cry. I did not scream. Risk management is about assessing the damage and mitigating the fallout. Emotion is a variable I could not afford. "Who gave you the admin codes?" I asked. It was the only question that mattered. Derek laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Does it matter? You are out. You are done. You think you have won?" I said softly. "I know I have won." Derek sneered. "Look at you, standing in the driveway with your boxes. You cannot do anything." I looked at the paper in his hand, then down at my watch. It was exactly 9:15 in the morning. You are right, I said, turning my back on them. I walked to the first box and lifted it. It was heavy, filled with the books that had taught me how to dismantle fraudulent empires. You just gave me 24 hours. I will use every minute. I checked into a short-term corporate rental on the outskirts of the city, a sterile apartment with gray walls and stiff furniture that smelled of industrial cleaner. It was the perfect environment for a forensic audit. I set up my laptop on the glass dining table, treating the surface like a command center. I was not a wife mourning a marriage anymore. I was a risk manager investigating a breach. I started by constructing a timeline. I pulled the data from the smart lock logs, the motion sensors, and cross-referenced them with Derek's alleged business itinerary. The data points did not align. There were gaps, specifically during the hours he claimed to be in client dinners. I opened our joint bank statements, going back 18 months. Most people look at the large withdrawals, but fraud usually hides in the consistent, mid-level transactions that fly under the radar. I filtered the spreadsheet. There it was. A recurring transfer of $4,200 sent on the 3rd of every month to an entity listed as Cinderlane Advisory. I had never heard Derek mention a Cinderlane. I pulled the tax filings for Ravenport Freight Group, the family company where Derek had just been appointed. Cinderlane was listed as an external operations consultant. It looked legitimate on the surface. But when I ran the address through a property database, it did not lead to an office park. It led to a post office box in a strip mall 3 towns over. Consultants do not work out of a P-O box next to a dry cleaner. I whispered to the empty room. My mind raced back to a minor anomaly from 3 months ago. Derek had claimed he lost his old MacBook and had sold it for parts. He made a show of being frustrated about it. But as I scrolled through the router history of our home network, I saw a device named Admin Ghost connecting to the Wi-Fi repeatedly over the last 6 weeks. The MAC address matched the laptop he said was gone. He had not sold it. He was using it as a clean machine, likely keeping it off-site or hidden in the house to conduct business he did not want on his main devices. I switched tabs to the cloud archive, the one he had failed to delete. I found a clip from 2 weeks ago marked Safe Room. The video was grainy, but the action was clear. Derek stood before the wall. Safe. He was wearing black leather gloves, which made sense if he was trying to avoid leaving prints, but then he did something that made me freeze. He deliberately peeled the glove off his right hand, pressed his bare thumb against the biometric scanner to open the safe, and then immediately put the glove back on. He wasn't trying to hide his entry. He was manufacturing a digital alibi. He wanted the system to record that Derek Hallstrom was physically present and authorizing access. Why would a thief want to be identified? I reached into my purse and pulled out a Ziploc bag containing scraps of paper I had fished out of the garage recycling bin the night before he returned. It was a habit of mine checking for shredded documents that weren't fully destroyed. I arranged the torn pieces of a window envelope on the glass table. The pieces formed a partial address. Bria Hart, and below her name, the address was P.O. Box 494. I cross-referenced it with the Cinderlane bank records. It was the same post office, just a different box number. But the routing number on the envelope fragment matched an investment bank known for high-yield offshore accounts. The picture snapped into focus. This was not just infidelity. Derek was funneling money from his father's company into a shell corporation, and Bria was likely the vehicle for moving that cash into private accounts. He was using his thumbprint to authorize the withdrawals legitimately so that later, when the money vanished, he could claim he was coerced or hacked, or perhaps he was setting up a fall guy. You are not just cheating, I said, staring at the screen where his face was frozen in the video. You are looting the company. There was only one person who would know the true state of the Ravenport finances before Derek started cooking the books. Gideon Hallstrom, my father-in-law. Gideon was currently recovering from a mild stroke at Everwood Residence, a high-end care facility. If Derek and Bria were moving this fast, they must have already neutralized him or isolated him. I grabbed my car keys and the hard drive. I needed more than digital logs now. I needed the original ledgers, the paper trail that couldn't be edited by a keystroke. "I am coming for you. Gideon," I said, grabbing my coat, "and I hope you are awake enough to sign your name." The air inside Everwood residence smelled of lavender and antiseptic, a scent designed to mask the inevitable decay of its wealthy inhabitants. I walked straight to the front desk, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet as I approached the receptionist. "I am here to see Gideon Hallstrom," I said. "Presenting my ID." The receptionist typed for a moment, then frowned, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I am sorry. Mrs. Hallstrom, the visitation list was updated this morning. You have been removed. The primary guardian is listed as Derek Hallstrom. Get the director," I said. It was not a request. 5 minutes later, I was standing in Dr. Eris's office. He pushed a photocopy of a document across his mahogany desk. It was a medical power of attorney, dated yesterday. "Your husband provided this," Dr. Eris said, adjusting his glasses. "It grants him full control over Gideon's visitation and medical decisions. We have to respect the chain of command." I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was Gideon's name, but the lines were jagged, trailing off at the end like a seismograph reading during an earthquake. It lacked his usual flourish. "Look at the timestamp," I said, pointing to the notary stamp. 4:30 in the afternoon. Now pull Gideon's medication chart. I know his schedule because I managed it for 3 years. That is exactly 30 minutes after his afternoon dose of hydromorphone. He was high as a kite when he signed this." Dr. Eris stiffened. "Mrs. Hallstrom, we follow legal protocols." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on his desk. "If you enforce a document signed by a patient under heavy sedation to isolate him from his family, you are not just following protocol, you are standing adjacent to an elder abuse case. I will have Adult Protective Services here within the hour, and I will make sure the press knows exactly which facility facilitated it." Dr. Eris paled. He checked his watch nervously. 10 minutes. Under supervision. That is all I can do until legal clears this. I walked into Gideon's room. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, his skin like parchment paper, but when he turned his head, his eyes were clear and furious. The nurse stood by the door, arms crossed, watching us like a hawk. "He kicked you out." "Didn't he?" Gideon rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves scraping together. "Yes," I said, taking his cold hand. "Yesterday. He came here," Gideon whispered, squeezing my fingers with surprising strength. "Him and that woman, the one with the same last name as you." "Hart." "Bria," I supplied, feeling a spike of anger. "They told me. They told me you were stealing from me. Mal. They said you were unstable. They shoved papers in my face while the room was spinning. I just wanted them to stop talking. So I signed." "It is okay," I said softly. "I am going to fix it." Gideon fumbled with the hem of his pillowcase. With a trembling hand, he produced a small brass key. He pressed it into my palm. "Ironclad storage." He hissed, glancing at the nurse to make sure she was not listening too closely. "Unit 19. The code is my birthday." "What is in there?" I asked. "The real ledgers," Gideon said, a cough rattling his chest. "And the uncut will, Derek. He thinks everything is on the cloud. He forgets I come from a generation of ink and paper. Go." The nurse stepped forward. "Time is up." I squeezed Gideon's hand one last time and walked out. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of indifference. As I turned the corner into the main hallway, I stopped. Bria was walking toward me. She was wearing a white dress that looked innocent from a distance but cost more than my car. In her arms, she held a bouquet of white lilies. They looked like funeral flowers. She stopped a few feet away, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You are too late." "Mal," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Derek already told you. It is over." I looked at the flowers, then up at her eyes. I fingered the cold brass key in my pocket. "You brought the right flowers," I said calmly, "but they are for your plans." I brushed past her before she could respond, walking out the automatic doors and into the parking lot before she could call security. I had the key. Now I just needed to find out what Derek had been trying to bury. The corrugated steel door of Unit 19 rattled loudly as I rolled it up, the sound echoing through the empty corridor of ironclad storage like a gunshot. It was 11:45 at night. The overhead fluorescent strip flickered to life with a sick yellow hue, buzzing incessantly. The air inside the unit was stagnant, smelling of dry rot and old paper. I stepped inside, pulling the string for the single bulb in the center of the room. The space was crammed with gray metal filing cabinets and stack after stack of banker's boxes. On top of the nearest cabinet sat a thick manila envelope, sealed with red wax. On the front, in Gideon's shaky cursive, it read, "If you are reading this, I bypassed the emotional weight of the letter for now. I needed ammunition." I sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor and pulled the first box labeled Fiscal Years 2023 to present toward me. I opened my laptop and started scanning. It took me 20 minutes to find the pattern Gideon had warned me about. I laid out the bank statements in a grid on the floor. There were transfers from Gideon's personal holding account to Cinderlane Advisory occurring every single month for the last 16 months. The amounts varied, but the trajectory was lethal. $12,000 here, $8,500 there. The cumulative total was over $400,000, enough to bleed a retirement fund dry. I picked up a physical invoice ostensibly from Cinderlane for consulting services. It was signed D. Hallstrom. At a glance, it looked like Derek's signature, but I squinted under the harsh light. The tail of the capital D did not end in a sharp strike. It curled back up into a perfect, bulbous teardrop shape. My blood ran cold. That was not Derek's handwriting. It was Bria's. She had a habit of looping her letters that she had never outgrown since high school. She was not just spending the money. She was signing the fraud. I dug deeper into the next box and pulled out a blue folder marked Estate and Real Property. Inside was the original prenuptial agreement Derek and I had signed 7 years ago. I flipped to page 14. Paragraph 4. Real property purchased using funds derived solely from individual performance bonuses or inheritance shall remain the separate property of the purchasing spouse. I felt a grim smile tug at my lips. I had paid the down payment on our house using my merger bonus from Harborline. The paper trail proved it. He could change the locks. But legally, he was squatting in my house. At the bottom of the box, I found a small clear plastic bag containing a black USB drive. A piece of masking tape on it read gate code. I plugged it into my laptop. An audio file popped up. I pressed play. Derek's voice filled the small storage unit, tinny but unmistakable. "Yeah, I changed the admin rights at 2 in the morning. She will wake up. She will wake up totally locked out. It is hilarious. I am going to tell everyone she is having a breakdown." He was laughing. And then another voice joined in Bria's voice. "Make sure you delete the backup log. Derek, we cannot leave footprints." I got it. He dismissed her. He hadn't got it. I reached for the final document, a set of meeting minutes from Ravenport Freight Group. The agenda item was expense allocation strategy. The attendees listed were Derek Hallstrom and Bria Hart. The notes detailed a plan to create fictitious vendor accounts to offset tax liabilities. Bria was listed as the strategy lead. I pulled out my phone and dialed. It was past midnight, but Miles Kerr, a partner at Kerr and Wexler and the most ruthless estate litigator in the state, picked up on the second ring. Mallory. His voice was gravelly with sleep. "This better be good." "Miles," I said, my voice steady. "I am sitting in a storage unit with the original ledgers. I have proof of forgery, embezzlement, and a conspiracy to defraud a vulnerable senior. And I have audio of them plotting to frame me." There was a pause on the other end, then the sound of a lamp clicking on. "Do you have the chain of custody?" Miles asked, his tone shifting instantly from sleepy to sharp. "I am digitizing it now," I said. "I need a forensic capacity assessment for Gideon by tomorrow morning. We need to execute a new trust and move every liquid asset he has into it before Derek wakes up. If Derek finds out you have the physical files, he will come for your throat," Miles warned. "He will try to discredit you professionally before we can file." "I know," I said, looking at the teardrop signature on the invoice one last time. "He thinks he is playing a family drama. He does not realize this is a federal crime." I spent the next 3 hours scanning every single page, uploading them to 3 separate encrypted servers. I placed the originals in evidence bags I kept in my car kit. I was not just building a case for divorce. I was building a cage. The notification from Harborline Risk and Compliance landed in my inbox just after midnight, shattering the silence of my temporary war room. The subject line was stark. "Notice of temporary suspension. Pending internal investigation." I clicked it open. The email stated that Human Resources had received an anonymous whistleblower complaint alleging that I was using my financial expertise to manipulate the assets of a vulnerable senior citizen. I read the text twice. The phrasing was not the work of a concerned citizen. It used specific terms like fiduciary breach and undue influence. This was not a random attack. This was written by Derek's lawyer. They were trying to cut off my income and credibility before I could even file a motion. I did not panic. I hit reply immediately. "I am formally requesting a full forensic audit of my work email and server logs for the past 6 months. I typed, my fingers hitting the keys with force. "I authorize full transparency. You will find 0 evidence of personal misconduct using company resources." I closed the laptop and picked up my phone to call my brother, Caleb. He was the only innocent variable in this equation. Bria, his wife, had told me he was away on a long-term construction project in Nevada, but his phone had been going straight to voicemail for 2 days. She was isolating him. Suddenly, a heavy pounding on the apartment door made me jump. I checked the peephole. It was Caleb. He was soaking wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, shivering in the hallway. I opened the door and pulled him inside. He looked like a man who had been running. "She called me Mal." Caleb stammered, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "Bria called me an hour ago. She was screaming. She said you were having a breakdown. She said you were sleeping with some guy in Phoenix, and now you are trying to hurt Dad to get money for him." I guided him to the stiff gray sofa and handed him a towel. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. Arguments are emotional. I needed him to see the data. "I am not going to tell you she is lying, Caleb," I said calmly. "I am going to show you." I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward him. First, I played the video from the porch camera. He watched in silence as his wife, the woman he married 3 years ago, stared into the lens and mocked me. Then, I pulled up the digitized invoice from the storage unit. "Look at the signature on this transfer authorization," I said, pointing to the bottom of the screen. "It authorizes $4,000 to be moved from Dad's account to a shell company. Look at the letter D." Caleb squinted, wiping water from his eyes. He froze. The signature was supposed to be D. Hallstrom. But the loop on the capital letter ended in a distinct, artistic teardrop shape. "That is Bria's handwriting," he whispered, his voice cracking. She puts that loop on everything, even our anniversary cards." "She is helping Derek embezzle Dad's estate," I said. "And she is wearing my clothes while she does it." Caleb put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. "Oh, God, Mal, I think I did something." I sat down next to him. "What did you do last month?" Caleb said, looking up with terror in his eyes. "At the airport. We were rushing to catch a flight to Cabo." She pulled out a stack of papers. She said it was just a standard debt restructuring for the house. She said she handled it so I would not have to worry. I just signed them. Mal. I didn't read them. My stomach dropped. She likely had you sign a power of attorney or a loan application. She is using your credit to launder the money so her name stays off the official bank loans. Caleb stood up, his face hardening. The confusion was gone, replaced by the cold anger of a man who realizes his loyalty was a weapon used against his own family. "I will kill him," Caleb said low in his throat. "No," I said, standing up to meet his eyes. "You are going to help me bury them. You are my witness now." My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Miles Kerr. "Court alert. Derek just filed an ex parte motion for emergency guardianship of Gideon. He claims you are a threat. If the judge signs this at 8 in the morning, we lose access to Gideon forever." I looked at the digital clock on the microwave. It was 3 in the morning. "We have 5 hours. I told Caleb. "Derek thinks he blocked me, but he forgot that the courts do not open until 8. We are going to get to Gideon first." At 7:15 in the morning, the automatic doors of Everwood residence slid open to admit my small army. It was me, my brother Caleb, my attorney Miles Kerr, and Dr. Rowan Pike, a forensic psychiatrist who charged $600 an hour to determine if a mind was sound. We moved in a phalanx, cutting through the sterile lobby with a speed that unnerved the night staff who were just ending their shift. We reached Gideon's floor just as the elevator doors opposite us opened. Derek's lawyer, a man named Sterling with a reputation for bullying, stepped out holding a thick manila envelope. He was here to raid Gideon's room before the court opened. I stepped directly into his path. "Get out of my way, Mrs. Hallstrom," Sterling snapped, trying to shoulder past me. "I have a filing for emergency guardianship." "A filing is not a court order," I said, my voice ice cold, "until a judge puts ink on that signature line at 9 o'clock. You have zero authority here. If you enter that room, I will have you arrested for harassment." Miles stepped up beside me, his presence looming. Sterling hesitated, checking his watch. He knew I was right. He backed off, pulling his phone out to call Derek. We entered Gideon's room. Dr. Pike wasted no time. He sat by the bed, turned on a recorder, and began the evaluation. "Mr. Hallstrom, can you tell me the year? It is 2025? Gideon answered, his voice stronger than yesterday. "Do you know who the president is?" "Do you know the current status of the S&P 500? Gideon answered every question with precision. He was weak physically, but his mind was a steel trap that had simply been drugged into submission the day before. Then, the door banged open. Derek and Bria rushed in, breathless and frantic. Derek's eyes were wild. "What is this?" Derek shouted. "Get away from him! He is not competent!" Gideon slowly lifted a trembling finger and pointed directly at Bria. "I am competent enough to know that diamond tennis bracelet on your wrist," Gideon rasped, his eyes locking onto Bria. "I bought that for my late wife in 1998. It was in my safe deposit box. Until you stole the key." Bria gasped, instinctively covering her left wrist with her other hand, her face flushing a deep, guilty crimson. The room went silent. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Derek lost his composure completely. He stepped toward me, his face twisting into a mask of pure hate. "You think you are smart, Mallory," he spat, spittle flying from his lips. "I will destroy you. I will make sure you never audit another ledger as long as you live. I will bury you in so many lawsuits you will be begging on the street." I did not flinch. I turned to the head nurse who was standing by the door, witnessing everything. "Please record that threat in the patient's chart," I said calmly. "Mr. Hallstrom just threatened a witness in front of medical staff." Derek froze, realizing he had just handed me ammunition. "We are leaving," I announced. Caleb stepped forward, lifting Gideon into the wheelchair with gentle ease. We bypassed Derek and Bria, exiting through the service elevator in the back to avoid any physical altercation. 40 minutes later, we were in the conference room of Miles Kerr's law firm. A notary was present. Gideon, propped up with pillows, signed the documents with a pen that scratched loudly in the quiet room. It was done. The Hallstrom Family Trust was revitalized. Every single asset, the house, the investment portfolio, the liquid cash was transferred into the trust. I was named the sole trustee. Derek was left with a minimum statutory allowance, attached to a no-contest clause. If he challenged the will or the trust, he would get absolutely zero. I watched Gideon sign the final page. I felt a momentary sense of relief, but it was shattered a second later. My phone rang. It was the fraud department of our private bank. "Mrs. Hallstrom," the agent said urgently. "We just flagged a transaction. A wire transfer for $920,000 is being initiated to an account in the Cayman Islands." "Stop it," I ordered. "We are trying, but it was authorized via a trusted device," the agent explained. "The security token matches the home network." I looked at the time. It was 8:45 in the morning. Derek wasn't at the house. Bria wasn't at the house. They were both chasing us. "Who authorized it?" I asked. "The user login is Derek Hallstrom," the agent said, "but the device ID is listed as living room iPad." I hung up, a cold realization washing over me. Derek had been laughing when he came home because he thought he had set up an automated exit strategy. He wasn't just relying on the guardianship. He had scheduled this transfer to drain the accounts the moment the banks opened, using a device he left at home to make it look like he was there. "He is trying to cash out," I told Miles, grabbing my coat. "He knows he lost the house." "He is taking the liquidity." "I have to kill the connection physically before the batch processes. Initiate the kill switch protocol," I told the fraud agent, my voice cutting through the quiet hum of the law office conference room. "I am invoking Section 4 of the account agreement regarding unauthorized access via a compromised endpoint. Flag the IP address. Freeze the transaction. If that money leaves the country, I will hold the bank liable for facilitating a felony." I hung up the phone and looked at Caleb. He was pale, pacing the length of the room. "How are they bypassing the two-factor authentication?" Caleb asked, running a hand through his hair. "Derek's phone is with him. I saw it in his pocket at the nursing home." "They do not need his phone if they have a trusted device," I said, my mind racing through the inventory of electronics in our home, a tablet, an old laptop. "Something that has been logged in before and clicked. Remember this device so it does not ask for a code." Caleb stopped pacing. He looked sick. "The iPad," he whispered. "The family iPad. Bria took it from my bag yesterday. She said she wanted to download movies for her nieces." I did not think anything of it. I nodded. It fit the pattern. Bria was not just an accomplice. She was the logistical engine. I opened my laptop and connected to the bank's security portal, which the agent had temporarily opened for me to upload evidence. I dragged and dropped the files, the audio recording from the USB drive, the photos of the physical ledgers, the router logs showing the MAC address of the device currently pinging the bank's server. "Chain of custody established," I muttered. "I am proving that the device authorizing this transfer is in the possession of a hostile third party." 10 minutes later, the bank's fraud investigator called back. Her tone had shifted from professional courtesy to alarmed urgency. "Mrs. Hallstrom, we stopped the transfer," she said, "but we found something disturbing in the metadata. The authorization required a biometric scan. The system confirmed it was Derek Hallstrom's thumbprint. He must have set it up before he left." I said, "Wait," the investigator interrupted. "The print matches Derek, but the behavioral biometrics do not. We track keystroke dynamics, typing speed, flight time between keys, shortcut usage. The user who typed in the routing number uses Control-V to paste. Derek's profile shows he always right-clicks to paste. The typing rhythm is 40% faster than Derek's baseline. This was two people working in tandem. One provided the print, the other executed the command." "Bria," I said, looking at Caleb. "Derek provided the fingerprint access, but Bria is the one driving the getaway car. I needed them to stay exactly where they were. I needed them confident." I picked up my phone and typed a text to Derek. "You win. I am too tired to fight you and your lawyer. I will come by at 5 o'clock to pick up my boxes. Please just unlock the garage. I do not want a scene. I watched the 3 dots appear almost instantly. Smart choice. Garage will be open. He took the bait. He thought I was retreating. In reality, I was just buying time for Miles Kerr to load the cannon. I have the emergency motion ready, Miles said, walking back into the room with a stack of fresh documents. We are filing for an immediate freeze on Derek's personal assets based on dissipating funds. And I am attaching the fraud report to a referral for the District Attorney's Financial Crimes Division. Caleb's phone buzzed on the mahogany table. He looked at the screen and stiffened. It is Bria, he said. Read it. I commanded. She says, Caleb, you need to meet me. I have evidence that Derek is manipulating everyone. I can prove he is the bad guy, but you have to trust me. Don't let Mallory ruin our marriage. She was trying to pivot. She sensed the walls closing in and was looking for a lifeboat. She wanted to turn Caleb against me to destroy my credibility. She is good, I said, opening a new file on my computer. But data is better. I spun the laptop around to face Caleb. On the screen was a credit application filed 6 months ago. It was for a $75,000 line of credit under the name Caleb Hart. The income stated was triple Caleb's actual salary. Look at the recovery email address at the bottom, I said gently. Caleb leaned in. Bria, consult iGmail.com. She took out a loan in my name. Caleb asked, his voice trembling with a mix of grief and rage. She told me she was handling the refinancing. I signed whatever she gave me. She committed identity theft against her own husband to fund Derek's embezzlement scheme. I said, she is not a victim. Caleb. She is the architect. Caleb picked up his phone. He did not reply to her text. He went to her contact card, scrolled to the bottom, and hit block caller. Then he looked at Miles. Give me the affidavit. Caleb said, I will testify. I will tell the judge everything she made me sign. I looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. We had the trust secured. We had the evidence. We had the witness. But a courtroom victory takes months. And I wanted justice today. I wanted to see the fear in their eyes when they realized their social currency was bankrupt. Where are they tonight? I asked Miles. The Stonebridge Civic Hall fundraiser, Miles replied, checking his calendar. Derek bought a platinum table to celebrate his promotion. Half the Chamber of Commerce will be there. Perfect, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. We are not going to the house to get boxes. We are going to the ball. The chandeliers inside Stonebridge Civic Hall cast a warm, golden glow over the city's elite, but the atmosphere felt brittle. I stood in the arched entryway, flanked by Miles Kerr and my brother, Caleb. Across the room, Derek and Bria were holding court near the ice sculpture. They looked like the golden couple of the season. Derek held a champagne flute in one hand, his other hand resting possessively on the small of Bria's back. They were laughing, likely telling the board members that I was at home recovering from a nervous breakdown. I stepped into the light. I was not wearing a gown. I wore a tailored charcoal suit, sharp enough to draw blood. I wore no jewelry. My face was scrubbed clean of makeup. In my hand, I held a single slim blue legal folder. The murmur of conversation died down as we cut a path through the crowd. People parted for us, sensing the shift in air pressure. Derek spotted me first. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners, before he decided to double down on his narrative. Mallory, he called out, his voice pitched loud enough to perform for an audience. Honey, what are you doing here? You should be resting, the doctor said. Save the performance. Derek, I said, my voice low and even. I did not stop walking until I was 3 feet away from them. Miles stepped forward, extending a hand not to shake, but to deliver a document. Mr. Hallstrom, consider yourself served, Miles said, his gravelly voice carrying over the silence. This is a temporary restraining order and a notice of title transfer. The residence you are currently occupying has been legally moved into the Hallstrom Family Trust effective this afternoon. You have zero equity. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises before the sheriff arrives." Derek turned the color of ash. He looked at the paper, then at me. He realized the house was no longer a bargaining chip. It was a fortress he had been locked out of. You cannot do this," Derek stammered, his eyes darting around the room. That was when I saw it, resting against the hollow of Bria's throat, catching the light of the chandelier, a sapphire pendant set in vintage silver. It was my mother's. It was the necklace she was wearing when she died. It was listed on my insurance rider with a specific identifier. I turned to the security guard standing near the VIP rope. "Officer," I said clearly, "I would like to report a theft in progress. The woman standing in front of me is wearing stolen property. That sapphire pendant belongs to the estate of Elena Hart. It has a star-shaped scratch on the back setting. I have the appraisal in this folder." Bria froze. Her hand flew up to clutch the necklace. The eyes of every wealthy donor in the room were glued to her. She looked at me, then at the guard stepping forward, and panic shattered her composure. "He gave it to me." Bria shrieked, stepping away from Derek as if he were radioactive. "I didn't steal it. Derek gave it to me. He said it was just lying in a box and nobody wanted it." A collective gasp went through the room. She had just admitted that her brother-in-law was gifting her family heirlooms. The implication of their intimacy was laid bare for everyone to see. Derek's face twisted into a snarl. He tried to salvage the unsalvageable. "She is delusional," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "My wife is unstable. She is imagining things." Caleb stepped out from behind my shoulder. He looked at his wife, then at Derek. He did not yell. He spoke with a quiet, devastating clarity. "That is my wife, Derek," Caleb said, "and she is holding my sister's husband's hand." The silence in the hall was absolute. The board members who had been laughing with Derek 5 minutes ago took a collective step back, distancing themselves from the stench of scandal. I looked Derek in the eye. I did not scream. I delivered the facts. The bank called. "Derek," I said softly. "They confirmed the biometric data on the wire transfer you tried to initiate this morning. They have your fingerprint authorizing a transfer of $920,000 to an offshore shell company. That is asset dissipation during a legal dispute. It is not just a divorce issue anymore. It is a felony." Derek looked at the door. The reality of prison had finally eclipsed the fantasy of his new life. He didn't say another word. He turned and shoved his way through the crowd, running toward the exit. Bria looked around, realized she was alone in a room full of people who now despised her, and ran after him. For the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of losing a lover. She was afraid of being an accessory to a crime. I watched them go. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. The data was already on its way to the district attorney. The hearing commenced at 9 o'clock the following morning. The courtroom air was stale, recycled, and thick with tension. Derek's legal team immediately launched their narrative, painting me as a vindictive, unstable wife who had isolated a sick, elderly man to hijack his fortune. They used words like undue influence and cognitive decline. Miles Kerr waited for them to finish before he stood up. He did not raise his voice. He simply handed the judge the forensic competency evaluation signed by Dr. Pike and the physical ledgers we had retrieved from the storage unit. "Your Honor," Miles said, his voice scraping like gravel, "we are not dealing with a family dispute. We are looking at a systematic draining of assets confirmed by forensic accounting." Then came the bank report. The judge reviewed the document detailing the blocked wire transfer of $920,000. The report confirmed the biometric authorization belonged to Derek, but the device location was inside the marital home while Derek was supposedly not there. The mood in the room shifted instantly from a civil disagreement to a criminal inquiry. Gideon Hallstrom, seated in his wheelchair, asked to speak. He looked frail, but his voice was steady. "I signed the trust documents of my own free will," Gideon stated, looking directly at the judge. "I am asking the court for protection from my son, not my daughter-in-law. He tried to medicate me into silence so he could steal my legacy." The judge denied Derek's guardianship petition on the spot. I then submitted the USB drive containing the gate code audio and the smart home logs showing the administrative lockout at 2:14 in the morning. It proved the mental breakdown Derek claimed I was having was actually a staged lockout designed to provoke a reaction. Then came the final blow for Bria. Caleb walked to the stand and submitted a sworn affidavit. He detailed the fraudulent credit line opened in his name and the documents Bria had tricked him into signing. Bria sat frozen at the defense table, realizing her narrative of being a passive observer had just been destroyed by her own husband. The judge looked over his glasses at Derek. "Mr. Hallstrom, you are ordered to vacate the residence by 6 o'clock this evening. Law enforcement is authorized to assist. Furthermore, all personal assets are frozen pending a criminal investigation into asset dissipation." We arrived at the house at 5:30. A sheriff's deputy stood by the patrol car while a locksmith waited on the porch. Derek and Bria were throwing clothes into suitcases. The laughter was gone. The arrogance was gone. Derek tried to approach me as I stood by the kitchen island. He switched tactics, his eyes wide and pleading. "Mal, please," he begged, reaching out a hand. "We can fix this. It was just a mistake. I was under pressure at work. Do not let them ruin me." When I did not flinch, his pleading turned instantly to venom. "I have a file. Mallory. I know things about your time at Harborline. I will leak everything. I will make sure you never work in this town again." Miles Kerr stepped forward, holding up his phone. "I am glad you brought that up. Derek, under state law, we are permitted to record conversations where one party consents. We recorded your phone call to Mallory last night where you threatened to fabricate evidence if she did not drop the lawsuit. That is extortion. And now, it is evidence." Derek went white. He realized there were no moves left on the board. Bria walked past me, dragging a heavy suitcase. I held out my hand. "The necklace?" I said. She didn't argue. She unclasped the sapphire pendant, my mother's pendant, and dropped it into my palm. She looked at Caleb, but he turned his back on her, staring at the wall. They walked out of the house and into the gathering dark, their lives dismantling in real time. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Harborline. Suspension lifted. Investigation closed. Welcome back. Mallory. The logs had exonerated me. At 6:15, the house was empty. The silence was not heavy. It was clean. I stood at the front door as the locksmith finished installing the new high-security core. I inserted the new key and turned it. The bolt slid home with a heavy, satisfying thud. I wasn't locking the door to keep a husband in. I was locking it to close the audit. The data had been verified, the liabilities removed, and for the first time in years, the system was secure. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people.